Welcome everyone to today's webinar on the Wasabi Cloud Storage Index. With me today is Bill Habib, our CMO, and Andrew Smith, our industry analyst. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us, Drew.
Oh, you know, it's the teamwork that makes the dream work, gentlemen.
Glad to be here, Drew.
Excellent. All right, so we have unbelievable numbers of folks who want to see this. This is a first of its kind survey of cloud storage users. This is unbelievable. And Andrew, we know we looked high and low, right, for any analyst information specifically around cloud storage. And what did we decide? We need to do it ourselves, right? Well,
Exactly.
we didn't necessarily do it. Right, we got Vance and Bourne to do it. Tell us a little bit about Vance and Bourne. Who are they? Why did we work with them?
UK-based survey house, right? So they're managing their own panel. They're the ones who are vetting respondents, making sure you get accurate, credible results, doing the follow-up, right? It's hard to get people to respond to an online survey and get complete. So that's what they do day to day. They're used by a lot of, especially a lot of infrastructure software and systems providers, pretty reliable and known in that space. So we were lucky enough to be able to work with them.
Yeah, no, I mean, the results are incredible. And, you know, we'll dive into it in just a moment. You know, I think the thing that surprised us all, right, is that this survey came back clearly illustrating what we consider the good, the bad, and the expensive. So, you know, there's the little foreshadowing here, right? And this is the first of its kind. But you know, we're gonna hit some really meaty topics here, like why cloud storage budgets are getting exceeded, kind of blown out. You know, how much are people spending on fees versus capacity? Little tidbit there. And then why are people exceeding their storage budgets, right? And for us, of course, being a cloud storage service provider, very telling to our strategy. But for folks who are, you know, trying to figure it out and understand why their bills keep getting bigger while their capacity isn't necessarily changing, we can help you out there. First, of course, as we always do, a word from our sponsor, Wasabi. Today's presentation is brought to you by Wasabi, the world's hottest cloud storage. Wasabi provides simple, predictable, and affordable hot cloud storage for businesses all over the world. We enable organizations to store and instantly access an unlimited amount of data at a fifth the price of the competition. Remember that, with no complex tiers or unpredictable egress fees. Wasabi is trusted by tens of thousands of customers worldwide and recognized as one of technology's fastest growing and most visionary companies. We're thrilled to have you here today. And let's go ahead and set the stage. This is what I would call the warm-up. We were talking before we started recording today, and I think we all generally agreed that we've sat in dozens or maybe more of these types of webinars. And the first thing we always wonder as somebody starts spouting off a bunch of numbers is like, where did this come from? Right? Is that fair to say, Bill, Andrew?
Yep.
Okay. Nodding up and down. That's the right answer. So here's what's going on, right? Fielded last year. So this is like fresh off the digital press, 1,000 respondents, right? That is a fantastic sample size. Anybody who's taken statistics knows that's a good number. We break that down. North America, EMEA, APJ, also very solid numbers there. We surveyed across a number of different company sizes, across a number of different personas, and of course, across a number of different industries. Don't worry, you will be able to get a copy of this with every nth level detail, but I just want to take you through some of the high level elements of where this all came from. All right. There's our breakdown in company size, a fairly good spread across small and large companies. Definitely in the industry space, tilted a little bit towards M&E, IT, telecom, MSPs, state and local government, a little less so perhaps in the leisure, construction, other commercial sector. That's fine. Now, here's something that everybody should pay attention to in terms of responses of vendors used, right? And Andrew, Bill, chime in here. We were only, pointed out, and in fact, I think we were pointed out in the other category by 3 companies, right? So this is not a self-serving survey, right? This was not rigged. I think is the way I would put it. Andrew, your feedback on this. I know you're our industry watcher.
Yeah, absolutely not rigged. You can tell the vendor selection pretty much shakes out the way that market share does. Trends the same way, which is great. We know we have a representative sample. And then the last key point about our sample is that everybody had to be somewhat involved in their organization's cloud storage purchase process or decision-making process, right? So that's why when you look at industry, we tend to get a lot of IT and technology and telecom providers who are those are the people who tend to be involved in those purchase processes. But obviously that was, you couldn't get in the door to the survey unless you said, yes, I know what's going on and I'm involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just one more slide, bear with us. And this reflects back to the distribution that we just saw, right? The vendor and industry personas. That's a tough one to get out. Again, also representative of market share. The maturity personas, and we're going to dive into this in a little more detail. We have a specific slide in this, very, very interesting in terms of the distribution of adoption. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. And then also, your organization's approach. We're going to dive into that one as well. So let's go to the cloud and beyond. So first big survey question, when did your organization first adopt public cloud storage? To me, this is almost like a perfect bell curve, right? With kind of a sharp drop off, which probably means that everybody's adopted by now, right? Bill's shaking his head, right? But what's I think fascinating here, and I promise I'm going to, move this around the table, the virtual table, is, 65% of the adoption before 2020. Bill, you've been working in the cloud space for a while and with companies is this surprising to you?
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising in that you've got this massive adoption prior to 2020. But the other interesting thing to me that it says is there were paradigms and ways in which people purchased and business models that were adopted before 2020, which was the best way that people could do it. That's the way we've been taught to adopt. And the world changes quickly. So it also says for those who adopted then, there may be new learnings from our survey that can enlighten them in the path forward. But it is very surprising to see such a steep bell curve before that. Oftentimes you see them a little more gradual, and that this one has gone so high so quickly is, I think, a testimony to the way in which people see the value of public cloud storage.
Yeah. And then, of course, since that time, and, hate to refer to it, right? But, the reality is COVID triggered, some significant adoption as well, whether it was planned or unplanned. Andrew, any insights on that part of the response?
Yeah, we've definitely got a good cohort of those, kind of what I would say COVID adopters, those who started to come into the market in 2020, 2021. We had a couple strays, 2022, right? They were fresh into their adoption, and then they were able to answer the survey. But it's interesting. I love this distribution. Just when you think about personas and when we think about how people answer questions, it's always really interesting to be able to look at this from the standpoint of maturity and say, well, how did those COVID adopters answer this question versus someone who's adopted since 2015, right? What are those differences in terms of how good are they at managing budget? How impactful or painful are fees to them?
Yeah.
Are there areas where mature buyers struggle less than new buyers? So having this type of granularity within our sample is great because we can go back and try to dig into all those details.
Yeah, yeah, and we also know that there's entire industries like video surveillance, right? Hence our recent launch of the Wasabi surveillance cloud, that are just scratching the surface of cloud storage adoption, right? So there's an entire there's another entirely new curve of adoption for just that industry that we're expecting to see. But this is the overall adoption curve. Very fascinating. You know, we kind of foreshadowed this a moment ago, right? In terms of those folks who are adopting, this is the breakdown. Kind of makes a peace symbol, if you will. I noticed that as I was spinning it, building the slides out. I think we all have a respect for and probably some experience in that traditional space, right? It's premises centric, if not premises exclusive, right? These are your, probably your largest, oldest, and most entrenched IT organizations, right? They have, playbooks and an operational excellence that they're not going to change, right? But then we get, this I don't know, juxtaposition of balanced and cloud first. Bill, what's your insights on cloud first?
Yeah, I think this is a super interesting result. And as you were kind of hinting at, Drew, probably not unexpected. I think the cloud first makes a very strong statement about those innovators, presumably the ones that were way ahead before 2020, that 65% have really seen an advantage to this and made a big bet on it. So I think those are probably the early adopters of that time period. It's very interesting to me that you've got this equal number who have gone full bore at the 41% all in, and an equal number who are putting eggs in different baskets, saying we're going to kind of see how this plays out. And then you've got this 18% who, as you said, just aren't going to budge and they're sticking with their guns. I think it's very, very noteworthy. The number have really embraced this entirely, and I would expect that the 41% on the left, some of those will be migrating to the 41% to the number on the cloud first on the right in the future, as the cost advantages get seen even more so, and efficiencies.
Yeah, Andrew, your thoughts?
Yeah, I love having this distribution again because it lets us look at questions a little bit differently. I mean, you guys, we've been going through this data for weeks, but I've been living this data for weeks, right? I've been buried in Excel sheets. So I wanted to let you guys in on a little bit of the nuance, right? Because we can't go through every question today, but when we looked at things like drivers of purchase decision or drivers of vendor selection, I should say, we had on the list sustainability was one of the reasons, right? And it was ranked like number 3. It came out higher than expected. It was a pretty cool result. But then when you filter that by just those respondents who identified themselves as cloud first, sustainability was their number 1 vendor selection criteria. And those traditional buyers, they were more focused on things like price, reliability, things like that. So it's really cool to to better dig into like the thought process of these buyers, not just how they've self-identified and how they think about their IT infrastructure purchases, but also what drives them in terms of vendor selection, purchase process, their challenges, things like that.
And Andrew, I think that makes perfect sense, what you just said about sustainability and cloud first, because we've been doing some other work to be released sooner than later around sustainability, and cloud has an advantage, right? That multi-tenancy capability lends itself to a lower carbon footprint, right? You're getting more out of fewer resources, and everybody benefits. I think, Bill, I'll agree to disagree. I think that there's going to be this, almost circular motion between the cloud first and the balanced, We did a webinar, I don't know, a couple months back on, is the cloud crashing, right? You've got folks who are claiming that, that's it, they're fed up, they've spent way too much money on the cloud and they're going back to on-prem, right? The hybrid approach seems to be growing in some respects. But then again, I think that, new entrants, new companies, article out today about Googlers, going off and starting their own businesses. I have no doubt that they're going to be cloud first, right? They help build the cloud. So it'll be interesting because I expect, Andrew, right? I know we're just literally at the beginning of getting this out into the public view. You're welcome, competitors. And I expect that we're going to continue to do this, year in and year out. So it'll be even more interesting, I think, once we start to get a couple of, successive data points to see how things change.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't want to keep us here too much longer, but having survey trend data over time is like the next holy grail, right? We'll actually be able to look into how these percentages change over time.
Now, this one, I don't think we can argue with at all amongst ourselves. Right. I mean, it just, we're in the business of storing data in the cloud, and we know, right, from what we did in 22 and what we're already doing in 23, right? In fact, we'd probably say the number's higher, but the survey says 84%, right, will increase their data storage in the cloud. I've got some thoughts about why. Let's start with Andrew. What do you think's driving this?
Well, I mean, I would say it's kind of a little bit of all of the above, but continued migrations toward the cloud and continued expansion of capacity in the cloud are and it's a picture of, I think, growing trust, reliability on cloud services, just kind of the general maturation of the market. A lot of, I think, positive ways to read into this number that are kind of hard to argue with. Whenever you see a number in a survey that's above 80%, it sticks out, right? Because typically you get a bunch of 40 and 50 percentages and you're like, everything's around that rate. But when you get a number in the 80s or 90s, you tend to take a lot of notice. And so overall, great story for as people continue to place their data and secure their data in the cloud, there's good things follow for the market.
Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, so my analogy to this is the following, and I'm going to pose a hypothetical question out to the people who are viewing this. For how many of you on your smartphone have you increased the amount of photos or videos that you store in the cloud? And I'm going to ask a second question. How many of you at some point have paid an increase to whoever your cloud provider is, Amazon, Google, whomever, in order to store those willingly by just saying, yes, I'm going to upgrade my storage capacity. I keep getting alerts on my personal Gmail that I'm reaching my storage capacity. Just click here to up your storage capacity. And so we as consumers are increasing the amount of data that we store in the cloud because it's really easy and it allows us to keep generating more photos and more videos and more emails. And so organizations are doing the same thing. If it's really easy for you to keep storing more data in the cloud because you want to access it easily and you don't want the burden of deploying equipment and gear on-prem and maintaining that, it just seems natural to me that the amount of data stored in the cloud will go forward. You look at all the hands that just raised here, and those of you in our studio audience, this is just, it's happening for all of us as individual consumers. It absolutely is happening for businesses of all types, media, entertainment firms, healthcare organizations, telecoms, software, tech companies, banks, you name it. Everybody's data is growing, and the ease with which you could put it in the cloud is unmatched.
And I'll add to that, the more that the primary data set grows, the more that the backup data set grows. Our friends at Veeam just released a new version of their flagship product, and lo and behold, they incorporated a direct to cloud capability for a number of reasons. But I think that, the demand is there to leverage in some cases, the preferential economics of cloud storage versus continuing to build out more and more capacity themselves, especially when it comes to long-term retention and compliance and all of the things. We'll save that for the next webinar. But let's go on. Let's kind of pivot or turn a little bit and talk about the multi-cloud world. As you saw earlier, right, we had a broad cross-section of respondents talking about what services they're using, but the reality is nobody seems to be using only one service, right? Azure users are using other services, IBM is using other services, AWS is using other services. So it isn't just an or, it's an and. I stole that from Bill. Right? And the answers, I think 60% plus is significant. Would that be fair to say, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this isn't necessarily groundbreaking news, but I think what we did want to point out are, we followed up with, what are the challenges? What are the benefits? Why are you doing this? I think what we learned is that multi-cloud is increasingly kind of the de facto standard, despite there being challenges, right? There's going to be problems. The more you add, the more complexity you create, and there's challenges with interoperability, things like that. But overall, it seems like enterprises were not only reaping the benefits of kind of select your own price, right? Be able to choose the right cloud provider for the right workload, right? And you get benefits in terms of performance and price from that, but also resilience, security, not being locked in. All of these things are driving the purchase of, or the decision to adopt multiple cloud storage providers. And I guess my last thing is the way that I look at this market now is it's not a zero-sum game, right? It's definitely I don't know what the opposite of zero sum is, but it's a promotional market where you can have more than one provider and turn that into a benefit for the way you operate.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the market is growing faster than anyone can corner the market share. Is that a fair statement, Andrew? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I think we don't see significant market share shifts.
Yeah.
But we do see growing adoption of multiple providers. It's not like the opposite would be, well, we started with two providers and we decided to consolidate on one, right? That's not our market trend and our reality. Our reality is we started with one, we acquired another company, we got 6 more, right? So that's kind of the way that things have gone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Bill, you're up next. Let's talk about, the direction of data. We're seeing that there's no doubt, right? We talked about this a moment ago, but we're seeing that traditional IT is slowing down. What's your take on this? This is a little bit of a complex one to kind of unwrap.
Yeah, my take on it would be the following. You've got organizations today who are under tremendous financial pressure, and that pressure is to do more with less. Sadly, we're seeing layoffs all over the country in a variety of different industries. And so, but guess what? You still need to run your IT infrastructure for your entire company, including your storage. But objectively, just read the headlines every week and every month. Objectively, organizations have to do more with less. The people who were available to maintain on-premise gear, for example, maybe some of those staffs have been reduced, or the hiring on those new hiring has been cut. Yet the data volumes are still growing like crazy. And so, what is the easiest route for people to handle these increased data volumes that we don't have a chart in here of this? They've been seen all over the place. Zettabytes of data, the growth in in the past couple of years and projected in the next couple of years is as much as we've seen in 10 years growth of data we're seeing in now 1 or 2 years time. So with those data volumes growing, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
The easiest route is to put it in the cloud, especially if you've already got some data in the cloud. The easiest route is to do that rather than going and buying more gear, figuring out where in your data center it's going to go, and all the things associated with that gear. It's just easier and more convenient to do that. Just like it's easier and more convenient to call an Uber from your phone rather than a taxi, or it's easy and convenient for all of us to just up our cloud storage on our phones. It's super easy and convenient for you to just add more data to the cloud. And so I think what we're seeing is just a natural evolution of it's better, faster, cheaper. And if it's better, faster, cheaper, then people will migrate to it.
Yep. Agreed. So speaking of cost, let's get to the real fun here. I've been waiting half an hour to get to this slide.
Me too, Drew. Come on, let's get on with it.
This is it. So anybody recognize this tender? I mean, mega yacht. This is it actually says the name on there. I should have photoshopped that out. This is the crux of cloud storage today, without a doubt. Fees are what is driving people away or to other vendors like Wasabi. So what's happening? We asked folks about, did you exceed your budget expectations? And lo and behold, there's no surprise, right? 52% exceeded their budget expectations. Now, what were those expectations? I don't think they specifically said that, Andrew, but I think it was pretty easy for them. and we have other slides that we didn't put in here of people with a shocked look on their face, right? That, whatever the baseline was for that capacity, they far exceeded that, right? Everybody's nodding their heads down. And of course, to juxtapose that is the fact that only 5% spent less. And that to me is actually shocking, because that means that they were probably doing a kind of a old cold mold storage, right? And they really truly didn't touch it. And when you talk about exceeding, right, you start to talk about the fact that there are a whole number of ways to exceed your budget, right? So the red ones, apologize, the type is a little small, but that just motivates you to download the report when we're done. But I'll help you out here, right? Number one, we should have done this like Family Feud, right? Number one reason that people exceeded their budgets: cross-region replication, object tagging, transfer acceleration, right? Moving their data, right, where they want it to be. Come down just a little bit, right? Higher API fees, puts, gets, reads, restores, lists, okay? And then right behind that, higher data retrieval fees, also known as egress fees. Not surprising. We know this, right? This is part of our story, our conversation at Wasabi, but it's so validating, right, to see the response. Andrew, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would add two, I think, points of color on this. So on the previous slide, you talked about 52% of organizations overall exceeded budget, right? And interestingly, the story only gets worse when you look at some of the subsegments. So remember the maturity chart you showed of when did you adopt public cloud? Of those who adopted in the past year, that 52% went up to 72%. So 72% of buyers who adopted within the past year exceeded their budget. And then when you look at this chart, so this is a little bit in the survey parlance, right? This was a multiple select question, and we gave them, I think there's 8 on here. There were 10 selection choices overall, because you've always got a other, fill in the blank, and I don't know. So there were 10 selections. 5 of them, if you look at all of these, have the word fee in them. So maybe we stack the deck a little bit, offering them 5 choices that included fees and some that didn't. But when you look at multiple select questions, the question then becomes, well, if all these fee selections are at the top of the list, who didn't choose a fee option? Okay, in this reason why you exceed your budget, only 10% of respondents didn't identify a fee. So
Wow.
90% of respondents, and we're talking about respondents who exceeded their budget, right? This is kind of like a subsegment. 90% of them chose at least one of those fee reasons. So it's like pervasive, right? There's a rank order that's important for us to look at here, but there's also just the overall pervasiveness of fees by almost everybody, 90%.
Yep. Yep. I think, you know, trying to look at the not so obvious thing. One thing that jumps out to me is the growth was higher than forecast, right? So the nature of data can be somewhat unpredictable. Add to that the X factor of unpredictable fees, because you cannot dictate to your divisions, departments, whatever, how and when they use that data. And Bill, you're up next, because here's the money shot. This is the net, right? And the things that you'd called out, Andrew, we just listed, right, are under those fee examples. Bill, 48% of the spend is what they're spending their money on. Please rant on this.
Oh, I will rant, Drew. Thank you. I view this as just astonishing. 48% of your budget is basically variable and unpredictable. Who wants to be going to your CIO or your CFO and having to explain why you've run over budget? What are you going to do when you run over budget? Are you going to have to cut something else in order to stay within budget? Obviously, you're going to need to stay within budget. So something else you expected to spend money on now has to get cut. The examples are real, and I've even seen bills for vendors that are many, many pages long of trying to decipher these fees. How do they get allocated across different organizations and functions? But it's astonishing when you look at the spend on cloud storage as a percent of budgets, and it's not trivial. But these fees, why should you have to pay these, and why should people be going into their year trying to manage to a particular cost structure and have almost 50% of your budget on this variable, and to some extent either out of your control? Or do you really want to be looking at each time you're going to move data in and out of the cloud? Should I move it? Should I not move it? What's this going to cost? What's that egress going to be? What's that replication fee going to be? What's this API fee going to be? Do you want people judging every single time you're moving data, putting this up to some approval committee or some approval process for if fees are going to be above a certain level, now we have to have so-and-so approve it, or we decide we're just not going to move the data. So from an operational perspective, this is a nightmare. From the risk of exceeding budgets, this is awful. And why should people have to deal with this? We have so many things so many IT products that we use today that are not metered in such a way as to incur these kinds of fees. And you want your data to be freely flowing and freely accessible, and not have to think about, should I put this on ice versus this is readily available? Who
Yep.
wants to think that way? Do I want to think for my own personal use? Which of the photos that I've taken of my family might I actually want to get back and look at? And which of those do I not really care about? And I'm going to put off someplace where I don't want to care about, or every time I'm moving them back and forth, I need to think about, oh, this is a little extra cost. I don't think I want to do that. Let me decide on this one or the other. Your enterprise data is far more valuable and more complicated. So who wants these? Like, I think it's an egregiously high number, and people shouldn't have to deal with that. Just on a matter of principle, you shouldn't have to be deciding each time data is being moved, or any of these examples that are seen here. These are tasks that people need to do. You shouldn't have to think every single time if I'm going to incur a fee, nor should you have to be troubled by if your organization is going about typical data movement and access tasks. If you let them do it in an open-ended way, then you're going to get whacked at the end of a billing period with these fees. That's what I think.
Yeah, I'm giggling, imagining a data egress committee, right? Like, standing there saying, well, we've had a ransomware attack and we really need to restore these systems. We were really hoping you would approve, a 10 terabyte egress. It's going to cost us, a few $1,000s. Would that be okay? Holy cow.
Isn't that absurd?
That it is absurd. It is absolutely absurd. Andrew.
And if you don't do that, which most
sorry.
people don't, then you're going to end up with these escalating fees.
Well, I mean, we talk about ransomware in other conversations quite a bit, and we specifically talk about the fact that you have to exercise your data. You have to validate the integrity of your backups. It's appalling that in some cases, and there's an asterisk here, okay? Pay very close attention, right? That asterisk means that not all vendors charge fees. We'll get to that. But you should be able to validate that data and restore with confidence. Andrew, you were talking a moment about, who gets hit the hardest. It also looks by region, there's some impact as well. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we dug into the data on this just to see if there was any silver lining, right? Was there anybody who is really not getting hit so hard by fees? But pretty much every industry, every geography, every persona type was within, kind of 3 to 5% of this range up or down between capacity or fees. But by geography, APJ seemed to struggle the most. They were at 50% fees, and that was driven by Japan. We dug down to the country level, and they were highest. I think they were at 51%. They kind of tipped the scale for APJ. And then by industry, managed service providers, I mean, these are the people who are essentially attempting to make a living off of cloud, and they have these fee structures eating into their margin essentially, and they were the highest. So that's pretty much a nightmare scenario right there. And then by newest and oldest adopters, there really wasn't that much of a difference. This kind of seemed to span all maturity levels. You were either at or slightly above, slightly below par. So really unfortunately, there was no escape.
Yep. Well, there is. Let me tell you who isn't paying fees. Anybody, right, who is going the new way with Wasabi is not paying fees. That's because we don't have tiers. We don't charge for egress. We don't charge for API. Come on, that you knew there had to be a plug here somewhere, right? We saved it for the very end. And check out the comparison, right? And this speaks right to these last few slides, right? 1 petabyte of storage, 20% egress. That's a reasonable amount of egress a year. Practically, a quarter to a fifth the price of any of the hyperscalers. That's where they make their money. It's all in the fees. Had a question come up today in another conversation about, a calculator, like how do I calculate the difference between Wasabi and anybody else? That's really easy. Wasabi is absolutely linear. Our price is perfectly predictable. Take anybody else's stated price, even with some reasonable discount, and double it. And that's what you're going to pay easily on a per terabyte basis. And that's just with some, predictable usage. Throw in some unpredictable situations, all bets are off.
Sure, I'd love to just add a comment here. Imagine a world where you don't have these complex tiers, no charge for egress, no charge for API requests. Imagine what that could do for you in terms of how you operate. Now you're seeing a comparison on this slide, and this comparison is not at all to say that all the products here are not perfectly fine products, and many of you listening on this webinar are no doubt using them for various types of storage use cases. But the reality is there are many copies of your data. There could be your primary copy and backup and a backup for the backup. I've spoken to many customers just in recent weeks who have said they wish to have more than one copy of their data and not have it all in one particular vendor's cloud for redundancy purposes in different parts of the country, for simply not having all of their storage eggs in one basket. And so many people may look at this and say, gosh, I've got a particular product in there that I'm using a lot of, but I want to use Wasabi for my backup. And that gives me the flexibility to reduce the cost of that backup dramatically. And a coexistence sort of relationship exists where a particular vendor is in there already and established, but the backups are going into Wasabi because the cost of those can be dramatically reduced. So this is not to say the vendors here are not perfectly great vendors. It's simply to say, imagine this world where you don't have to deal with the complex tiers, the egress charges, and the charges for API requests. That's the world of Wasabi, and we coexist very nicely with the other players that you see here.
Well put. Excellent point. Outstanding. Well, Bill, Andrew, thank you so much for your insights today. Really appreciate it. For anybody who'd like to dive deeper into the Wasabi Cloud Storage Index, it should be available as part of the attachments in the webinar. And feel free to download it. Lots of great information in there, lots of great insights. But as you have probably just heard for the last 5 or 10 minutes, we really brought it home with, it is boiled down to you are paying more fees than you need to. You can unlock the value of your data without having to spend all of your budget to do it. And it doesn't have to be an or, it can be an and. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And I think we'll jump now into the Q&A.
Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us and tuning in to hearing what our wonderful speakers today have been talking about with the Wasabi Cloud Index. We'll get into the Q&A, and I'm just going to help moderate some of the questions. So yeah, continue to keep submitting your questions. We'll have plenty of time to get through some of them. So the first question that I see is, does Wasabi support storage of PL4 protection level 4 data? And if not, are there plans to do so in the future? Oh, Drew, I think you're on mute.
Wow, I clicked it twice. It wouldn't unlock.
Matt, you're here now.
Who did that? Who did that? Yes. So the answer is we do have plans to do so in the future. We've actually got the specific vaults lined up to support PL4 data. And at this point, I would say stay tuned, subscribe to our newsletter, and we should have an announcement fairly soon as for the plans to support that.
Awesome. So do you guys have customers that are using AWS or Google Cloud for their storage and then are using Wasabi for a backup? And could you maybe elaborate on the use case for that?
Bill, you wanna cover that?
Oh,
Now
Bill, you
Bill's
are also on mute.
I unmuted myself. Am I seen?
Yeah, you
I'm
can
telling you, there's gremlins.
There are gremlins, the Bright Talk gremlins. Yes, that's a very, very common use case. And we have many, many customers. In fact, backup and archiving is probably our most common use case today. We do this in conjunction with a variety of different backup applications. And a scenario could be, we've got data centers in state or country X, and we like to see a backup in a different location. It could simply be somebody would like to see an additional backup copy outside of one of those main names that were presented in the question. So you see a variety of different scenarios and with a big range of different backup applications as well. I don't know, Drew, if you'd like to add to that, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. Backup and recovery, data protection, especially, in the context of ransomware mitigation, massive use case for Wasabi customers. Just to rattle off a few names, Veeam, Haiku, Commvault, Rubrik, MSP 360. There are thousands upon thousands of folks protecting their data and leveraging immutability with Wasabi every day.
Awesome. Does Wasabi provide cloud architecture training?
Yeah, so no, not really. As you know, the one thing we do, which is cloud object storage, it's usually pretty straightforward. Usually we fit very nicely into existing cloud architectures, right? There's that little box over on the side that says storage or cloud storage. That's us. You know, I hate to say it, but I will. If you're looking for some great cloud training, Amazon has some great free training. You know, the principles of cloud services, cloud architecture, check them out. It's all free. And they'll even give you a badge and a certificate, and you can put that on LinkedIn and tell all your friends about it.
Yeah, I think part of the point of our entire platform is that S3 compatibility, right? That Drew's alluding to, and that's what Wasabi is committed to, right? We don't have our own proprietary Wasabi API calls or anything like that. So we're pretty much, I hope, designed to be inherently
we are.
We're intuitive to the de facto standard, right?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I forgot to bring that in, right? You can lift and shift.
Yeah.
Very, very simple, because we follow the S3 API standard or de facto standard. If you have an existing architecture today that points to, let's say, Amazon S3 standard, and you want to change that and point it to Wasabi, very simple, right? Get your credentials, get your, your secret word, and just point it somewhere else. Like, well, point it to Wasabi, and you're off to the races. Very easy to do. That's also part of our, keep it simple approach to cloud storage.
I do know also, just to add on to that, I can't see who asked the question, but I know that our channel marketing team has been working on some technical trainings in our partner portal that should be coming out sometime soon. So if you're a partner with Wasabi, you'll see that in our partner newsletter once that's live. Yeah, like Drew and Andrew alluded to, probably won't be anything as in depth or so many questions as AWS, because we just don't have the same tiers and things like that. But team is definitely working on getting some more technical resources for our channel partners out there. And I just want to say thank you to whoever made a note to us about they switched to Wasabi 6 years ago, and it's dramatically reduced the costs. Love seeing that as well. If you want to shoot us a comment also. Okay, moving on to the next question. So 37 Signals has been very vocal about their departure from the cloud due to excessive fees related to compute. Is Wasabi seeing or hearing similar stories related to cloud storage?
Every day, but in a different way. I know I caught you off guard there, Bill.
Yes, you did.
37, let's be very clear about something. 37 Signals was really bent out of shape because their computing fees were completely out of line with their cost structure. And they've been completely transparent about their dissatisfaction and their desire to bring those workloads back on-prem, right? Having that infinite scalability just made no sense for them, because their business was relatively steady state, and they were paying for surge capabilities that they probably weren't ever really taking advantage of. All that being said, they really did expose the fact that excessive fees were part of what drove them, to this conclusion. Now, interesting fact, they just, I think last week, stated that they have 8 petabytes of data, and they're figuring out what to do with it. That's the next step in their, potential repatriation. I'm working on an article for our Bucket, our online publishing platform, to kind of invite them to talk to us, because I think I did some of the math right. We could save them $500,000 a year in object storage costs Now, that being said, and this is a long answer, sorry. We came out with a migration service last year, Wasabi Cloud Sync Manager. And in that time, we've already helped a number of big customers move a number of petabytes into Wasabi, and they've realized in 3 months or less a full return on investment in making that switch. Why? Well, what did we just talk about for the last 45 minutes? They don't have to pay egress fees anymore. They don't have to pay API fees anymore. They're free. And now they're happy. Just like the other person who said they came to us 6 years ago and, it changed, dramatically changed their cost structure. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're seeing. And we continue to get those inquiries almost on a daily basis.
Great. So moving on to the next question. What are the top data security or compliance concerns that you guys are seeing from customers or partners?
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
We asked about this in the survey. I don't think we covered it in kind of our summary, and I think there might be some data points on this in the attached, the related docs that you can see. But it was interesting when we asked about security concerns, top security concerns as it relates to cloud storage services, because the number one choice was lack of experience. So it's kind of like in the triumvirate of people, process, and technology. The people and process side of that was a little bit winning out over things like lack of native security tools or something like that, or lack of native data protection, right? It was a little bit more on the end of we need more experience and training when it comes to security associated with cloud storage platforms. And that was an interesting finding for me. But other than that, we also asked about, maybe this isn't so much security, but we asked about key compliance initiatives. And it was kind of the usual suspects, like a lot of GDPR in EMEA, especially ISO standards, NIST, CCPA. FedRAMP was pretty far down the list, but still a major concern depending on the industry, public sector specifically. HIPAA, it was on there too. These were kind of like the top 5-6 compliance initiatives. So I don't know if that answers the question, but those are kind of, it gives you a little bit of insight into what we were seeing in terms of security challenges and compliance requirements.
And just to follow on to that, Wasabi does support HIPAA, GDPR, MPA, CGIS, FINRA, SEC. We have an entire page on our site dedicated to all of our compliance capabilities. So check it out, wasabi.com/compliance.
Awesome. I know we have just a few more minutes. So if you guys have any other questions, please submit that. I think we'll get to maybe one more. So can you talk about whether Wasabi Cloud Storage can help with protection or recovery of data in the case of a ransomware attack?
I think Isabel, you and I spent the last year covering that topic, and absolutely, the answer is yes. So, data protection is the number one recommended tactic by NIST, by CISA, by everybody, right? Back up your data first and foremost. And to that end, use immutability, lock those backups, protect them from being encrypted out from under you or from being altered or deleted, right? Protect them from the bad guys externally. And there's also, unfortunately, bad guys internally, right? There's unfortunately people, disgruntled, whatever, contractors that just decide to erase all your backups. And that's where we come in, right? We provide that virtual air-gapped landing zone for immutable backups, right? So you have one on-prem, you have one maybe in a tape vault, you have one in the cloud, and in the cloud, you guarantee nobody can break it, nobody can touch it, Definitely check out, if you're a Bright Talk subscriber, I think we've got probably half a dozen or more in our ransomware series. Check it out. I know when we brought Object Lock out, we did a specific webinar as well on what is Object Lock, why does it matter, how it helps you protect your backups. So a lot of great stuff there.
Great. I think that's about all of the time we have for questions today. Just want to, redirect the audience to the attachment section. There you can see the full Wasabi Cloud Index and download that and check it out. As well as, reach out to us if you have any other questions. And thanks to the team for joining today. And thanks for joining audience.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.